Welcome to the Behind the Calls podcast presented by Make Good Grow. Each episode we'll hear from an inspiring leader from the third sector and unpick the highs and lows of running a good cause. Sit back, relax and enjoy. Welcome, good morning everybody. This is the Behind the Calls podcast and live stream. It's Make Good Grow. And we are here to mark Mental Health Awareness Week, and we've got two very special guests in the studio. So if you are watching live on Instagram, hello, and if you're watching live on YouTube, then hello to you all. There's cameras all around us. And if you're watching back at another time, then that's brilliant as well, because this is going to be available for people to dip in and out of when they are able to do so. So I'm just going to set the scene a little bit, and then we'll move over to introducing our guests for today. So I'm Rob, I'm Managing Director of Make Good Grow, and really pleased to be able to kind of mark this occasion and kind of look at the issues and the needs of mental health in our communities. Obviously Make Good Grow is all about supporting good causes and helping good causes to thrive. So there's lots of good causes out there like the ones we're talking about today, and kind of leaving little cliffhangers and drip feeding information. We'll introduce you properly. It's coming up. But just to touch on Mental Health Awareness Week, I'm going to read a little bit from the Mental Health Awareness Week website just to set the scene, because obviously this year's Mental Health Awareness Week is all about loneliness and our mental health. And so on their website, they say loneliness affects many of us at one time or another. We know that loneliness can be both the driver for and a product of poor mental health. Our society is changing fast. The pandemic has given rise to a sense of loneliness and isolation, undermining confidence in daily routines. In recent times, many of us have had far less access to loved ones. Tech is enabling healthcare professionals to see more patients without the need to travel, but on the flip side of the coin, convenience and cost efficiencies are driving more and more activities online. Our workplaces are also changing, with many adapting to home and hybrid working, and we need to embrace this change while building and maintaining meaningful connections with our colleagues. So Mental Health Awareness Week has got four key points, which is to raise awareness and help people to understand links between loneliness and poor mental health, to invite conversations, so using advice, information to start conversations with people, colleagues, family, friends, making sure that people who you are connected with know that you are open to having that conversation. They're looking for volunteers to give their time, and we'll talk a lot more about that and how Make Good Grow is all about finding volunteers in the right way and giving their time to have the most impact. So we can definitely unpick that a little bit more. And then asking others to act, so raising the issues within the community and encouraging more people to act and get involved, which I think is really important. So with that introduction over and done with, now we know why we're here and what we're discussing. I'd be really pleased to introduce two organisations that are here representing today. We were hoping to have a third one, which was Leanne from the Esther Project and Helping Hands, but unfortunately she's not able to join us, so we'll have to catch up with her at a separate podcast episode. But I've got Andy from Impactivity Talking Without Limits, and Cheryl, who's CEO of Shine Youth. So Andy, do you want to go first and tell us a bit about yourself and your own personal journey, how you came to be doing what you're doing and that kind of thing?
Yeah, of course. Good morning, everyone. So I'm the founder of Impactivity Talking About Limits. We're a sports coaching company, and essentially we use sport and physical activity to promote positive mental health. Sport was always something that I've been involved with since I was little, and it's pretty much the only thing I know. And about 2 years ago, I actually attempted to take my own life, got diagnosed with depression, and the reason I was struggling was because sport was taken away from me.
Right.
That was always my release, and with the pandemic and everything, we couldn't train, couldn't do anything, and I was really struggling. And I was faced with a sink or swim sort of moment when, it was around the Christmas period, and I'm speaking to doctors and therapists about what's been going on with me, and I'm faced with a sink or swim moment. And I was like, well, the only thing I've ever known is try to be proactive, try and get on with things. And that's when I decided that I could make a difference, or try to make a difference. Yeah. So I actually partnered up with the Prince's Trust at first. I went on their enterprise program, and I pitched the idea that I wanted to use sport and coaching to promote positive mental health and essentially tell my story to make sure no other men at the time, that's what it was going to be aimed at, didn't have to go through what I had to get the help that they deserve. And that's where it came from. Because if I'm I know I'm sat down right now, but I'm 6'8". So
you are a tall lad. I did notice that when we came in. Yeah,
like, yeah. All the cameras are like up here, but I'm 6'8". So immediately when people see me, like there's like a stigma always, the big man. And when I was being brought up, that's sort of what I was told indirectly, that I was the person who had to be the shoulder to cry on.
Yeah.
I was never told that I could show emotion. So if I can, stand in front of a room of 100, 200 people and say, this is my story, and be emotional and be honest with my mental health journey, hopefully it inspires someone sat there to go and talk to a loved one.
Yeah.
So if I can do it to a room full of strangers and whoever's watching or whatever,
absolutely,
then hopefully it will encourage someone to go and have a conversation with someone who they trust and feel safe with. So that's where it was born, and then it's just grown from there, really.
That's quite a journey as well in quite a short space of time, isn't it? Because we talked before, and you've only been doing this for a year, right? A year this week.
Yeah, a year this week we launched.
And you talked very openly and without flinching about what happened a couple of years ago and the position that you were in and how you were feeling and stuff. That's a dramatic turnaround.
Yeah, and like when I look back at it, sometimes I have to remind myself that I'm still, regardless of the business, I'm still on a really early stages of my recovery with my mental health. So I have to sometimes take a step back. But then, you get emails or messages from people that you've worked with saying that you've helped them, and it makes it all worthwhile, I guess. And it's sort of a therapy for me when I'm out there doing my work and talking about it. So it makes it all worthwhile. So yes, a year old this week, but there's plenty more to be done. So it's going to be going for a while longer.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we'll come back to talk more about what it is that Impactivity does, but Cheryl, tell us a bit about your journey, your experience.
Sure, yeah. So ever since I was a teenager, I've absolutely loved seeing other people make progress, do things that they couldn't do before, perhaps with a bit of a guidance. I've absolutely found that really rewarding. So I began my working life going into teaching to do exactly that, help others learn, progress, and fulfil their potential. But what I really found rewarding when I was teaching was seeing the kids who it became clear had really tricky family circumstances, to overcome. And that's where I found it was rewarding. It may be really small steps, but for them it was massive, and it was just fantastic. So I then I retrained and I worked in social work, really, because then it widened the area where I could help, and I could try and see if there was any assistance I could give at home for situations as well as in the young people's school life. After that, I worked in the looked after children's education service, bringing obviously my teaching skills and my social work knowledge together. And following that, really, a position in a charity that was there to support young people that were bereaved came up, and I was invited to apply, and I did that for a little while, and sadly that needed to close down. The trustees took a decision to close that charity, and the schools where we were delivering that bereavement support were aghast, really, and sort of saying, where else are we going to access support for these young people, that can do so in the way you can, which is fairly swiftly. You're really responsive. You're coming into schools where the young people are already, they feel relatively comfortable there. You're not sort of asking them to go anywhere they're not familiar with. So the team that I had at the time, lots of volunteers and a couple of staff, said, well, if you can keep the work going like the schools are asking, we want to do that too. So that's how Shine was birthed, really. It was the response. That was June 2019, and we had to pivot. That was one we've all learned, isn't it, through the pandemic. We had to kind of work quite fast at that time, because it was just really important to us that the young people that charity had been supporting weren't left without support. So we worked in July as that charity, set ourselves up over the summer, and Shine started in September 2019.
Well, okay. So still a relatively new charity itself as well,
Absolutely, yeah. But we were just able to widen our remit, because what we were working with, although the young people had suffered a family breakdown, separation, that was their loss, or through bereavement, it was a whole range of mental health issues, anxiety, lots of different emotions that, as you've just spoken about, really hard to sort of make sense of, find a language for, find ways to build your resilience and kind of walk through them, overcome them. So we're a broad young person's mental health charity now, as opposed to just bereavement.
Okay. Brilliant. Well, that leads us on really to the next kind of part of the discussion, is to find out a little bit more about your organisations and, you know, what you do, how you support people, and you both touched on it. So do you want to go into a bit more detail? And you know, Andy, over to you first, and tell us a bit more. And just, I'm going to say, just if you can get slightly closer to the mics as well, and I'll turn them down if we peak. Yeah, we did talk about doing a karaoke song, didn't we, to start the session? But you're ready. I mean, come on. maybe sing your next response or something.
Yeah,
like, turn it into an operetta. Like
maybe at the end. I don't want you to lose viewers.
No, okay.
So Impactivity runs 2 programs essentially. So the first program is called Everybody Can Talk, and that, like I said earlier, to start off with, I was just going to do Big Men Can Talk, because at the time, obviously, male mental health was a real problem. I feel like I've said it on a few podcasts. As a man, a lot of the time you're thrown into that hunter-gatherer sort of thing. Don't show emotion, be strong. And I was like, right, we've got to focus on men. But then you're looking at everything through the pandemic, and let's be honest, it's not just men who are struggling. So Everybody Can Talk was aimed at everyone. What that program is, it's workshops where I go into schools, universities, businesses, and tell my story, but then also throw in, you know, team building exercises and facts and figures about mental health, just to get people thinking and having conversations. And it's surprising how many people will turn up and they'll come into it not wanting to say anything. But the way it's done, it's not designed to force someone to stand up and go at the end, right, this is me, this is my story. But it's just hopefully planting the seeds so they will, like I said, will go home and have a conversation. But what it has done and what I've noticed is the discussion it creates about, you know, maybe it's family members that they've noticed stuff with, because we go over, you know, signs and symptoms of anxiety and stuff. And I think, and it's basically just designed to raise awareness of some of the mental health issues that are so, you know, prevalent right now, and people are seeing it, but no one's ever spoke about it before. So it's about removing the stigma surrounding the conversations, and, you know, just getting people talking. And I think, you know, going into the schools and universities, it's probably especially universities, I've noticed like the biggest, you know, concern amongst like staff when you're talking to them, because obviously they've been isolated for so long and people have missed out on 2-3 years of socialization. And that's where a lot of problems are coming from now. There's, you know, even in some of the high schools I go into, they've not been with people for 2 or 3 years. So it's just about using sport as a way to create conversation. So it's not forced, as in, right, we're going to talk about anxiety, we're going to talk about depression. It's, let's go and play a game of rugby or cricket, and automatically you start having conversations. It's about making a connection where I might, at the end of the session, the people who I've done it for might not come and talk to me and say, Andy, this is going on. But they might have made a connection with one person in that group. So that's what that's designed for, the Everybody Can Talk. So it's more of like an educational presentation. And then the other branch is Big Men Can Talk. Now that's more our charity fundraising. And that's something that's like great fun, and that's just focused on sport. So what I do, I create events to get, at the minute it's just been men together in teams, but I'm hoping to get like, you know, women involved as well. We've climbed Snowdon so far, and we've done, it's called Ludge Church in the Peak District, absolutely beautiful, a 17-mile hike. And we've raised money for charities such as Calm, Mind, and also put money back into Impactivity to allow me to go out and deliver the Everybody Can Talk workshops for free.
Right, okay.
You know, obviously with schools and stuff, fundings, but even businesses, some fundings, you know, they haven't got any. So if I can go and say, listen, I'm going to deliver this for you because there's a great need for it, that's where the money goes. So, you know, we've got other stuff planned, you know, like black tie events, you know, boxing nights, just trying to relate it to sport and different hikes. But I've sort of like, you know, put pressure on myself, because I was like, we'll start easy. But they've only got to get harder. If people are going to donate money, I'll be up Everest in a few years, and it's like, I don't know what I've done here. But that's the idea of it, just bringing people together as a team, to have not necessarily conversations about mental health, but hopefully it just gives people confidence to socialise again.
Yeah.
And then they can have those conversations, which, you know, this week we're talking about loneliness. Bringing people into a team, from what I've noticed, has been, it changes people.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's the 2 programs that I run.
Brilliant.
And that's what we do. So, yeah, keeps me busy anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So come on then, tell us a little bit more about Shine Youth and what happens.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, as you just said, Andy, there's been loads of work going on, hasn't there, to raise the profile of the fact that exactly authentic humanity includes really difficult stuff, and we're emotional, aren't we? And as you say, there's a lot of sort of limitations, whether it's through kind of expectations or lack of space that are put on people, that they don't get to connect and talk about really difficult things, or feel that they're going to be a burden on others, so they don't naturally talk about what's going on. But what we do is we jump straight in there, really. So we deliver one-to-one pastoral mentoring in secondary schools right across Solihull, where we go in for every week of the academic term to meet with a young person one-to-one, ideally for kind of 12, 14 sessions, although the beauty is that we can stay involved for as long as it's really needed. You know, year on year, mental health referrals into the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service have risen year on year on year. Last year, 2021, there was 1.25 million referrals, and the Children's Commissioner, her survey showed that only 32% of those were able to receive treatment. You know, we know, well, treatment, therapy, supported talking ways that they are then going to be able to unburden themselves and connect. A lot of the specialists that have worked in extreme emotional distress around trauma work have discovered that actually, as well skilled as anybody can be, and I don't knock that at all, something happens in the human connection, this therapeutic relationship that is just powerful for not feeling alone in your difficulties anymore. You know, we see young people leave the room, they say in a first session, "Oh, I'm so glad I've told you." You know, and actually just us turning up week in, week out, so they can come and share how they are, even before we start moving to the stages of, well, have you thought about it from this perspective? You know, we have a lot of skills, tools, approaches like CBT and things that we can use to actually help young people to think differently, or to find out what works for them, really, to make them feel as strong as they can in social situations or other things that they're facing. But that human connection, I think the pandemic showed us we're all built for, aren't we?
Yeah.
You know, the isolation, you know, obviously even before the pandemic, actually, it's young people that the surveys had showed felt more isolated than the older population. There was a Radio 4 survey done by the BBC in about 2018, I think, that said 29% of those aged 65 and over reported feeling lonely. But amongst the 18 to 24 age group, that went up as high as 40%. And that was back in 2018. And as you said, it's
so even before the pandemic, that issue was there, yeah.
Yeah, sure. And young minds of others have reported, you know, the impact. And schools are telling us, like you've just said, they see the impact of that sense of isolation. And you know, adolescence, it's a time where you're forming your identity. You know, your peers and that connections are arguably more important than at any other stage. So schools are seeing the impact, and the resources just aren't there, really. So what we're doing is essential in plugging that gap, really, and it's just so rewarding, you know, to see the difference it makes to young people having a place to connect every week.
Yeah. I definitely think the things you're saying about the CAMS referrals and the waiting times and stuff for young people, I've got first-hand experience of that right now, and you know, it's been more than 6 months already, and there's still no sign of any kind of intervention being available even. And it's just, you know, that seems to be being repeated everywhere across the country. It's such a strain on resources, so there is a reliance on organisations, you know, like yourselves, that are kind of separate from that whole ecosystem, isn't there? And you know,
and if we can come in and fill those gaps, obviously it's the young people that really benefit. The earlier that we can step in and help people, obviously the prognosis is so much better, you know. So yeah, and
I think, like you said as well, you both touched on the relationship with schools and, you know, places of education and stuff, and that is a really important place, isn't it? Because, you know, they've been removed from those environments for nearly 2 years and got used to being in a different, you know, state, really, haven't they, young people? Like I said, first-hand experience in my house of two young people who don't really want to get out of their bed and come and do anything else and, you know, engage with the real world and that kind of thing. That is a massive challenge in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I think many families felt more kids suddenly wanted to go to school than ever before.
100%.
It's appreciated.
It's just, and it's tough, like you said, the schools are helpless in a way because they know that the kids need or want support. But like you said, there's nothing there, or there's not enough there to support, you know, those kids that are in need. And that's, you know, hopefully where people like us can come in and, like you said, plug that gap, because it's amazing to see in just, like you said, a short amount of time how much of a difference you can make. I did some work in a primary school in Coventry, and to be fair, I'd never really thought of going into primary schools, and the conversations I had there were amazing because they were younger. They're obviously so, you know, I guess they're so upfront with what. Yeah,
they've got less baggage and less kind of.
So they're so
filters,
upfront with what's going on, and the conversations were so refreshing. But it just showed the need even more, that talking primary schools, high schools, colleges, unis. You just think about the education sector alone, how many people need support. And then you look at like the NHS figures for people like my age or whatever needing support. It's like, what do we do? Like, what do we do?
How is it ever going to be able to be a sustainable model in society to kind of keep up with all that support? And also, we're only hearing from the people that are comfortable and ready to come forward. That's the other thing, isn't it? You know, what does it take for someone to actually be in a position where they are comfortable enough to come forward and say, actually, I do need help?
That's where I think it's not just normalising that this is part of, like I said, authentic humanity for everyone, but it's then making the kind of I don't keep wanting to use the word treatment, but, you know, they're talking about it, what we're talking about, that we know and have seen firsthand, just makes the difference. Making that accessible so that that's on the high street. You know, you can walk in and you know that you're welcome as you are, and you can chat and you can access talking groups or activity groups that might have a focus on some anxiety tips or something. Making it normal but accessible, that's the key.
I think it is. You know, my previous role before I was at Make It Grow was working for a national charity supporting adoptive families, and you know, frontline service delivering support to adoptive parents and things like that. And one of the reasons I went and did that job was when my husband and I adopted our kids, I actually had a moment where I phoned the doctor asking for help. I was like, I don't know how to cope. And I hope and pray that no one else ever receives the kind of response that I got. But the doctor basically said, you need to man up, take a deep breath, and, you know, look around you, other people are worse off, kind of thing. And
the worst words ever.
Yeah, and that was like their support for someone ringing in tears saying, I really need help. So, you know, hopefully that you can get access to support. And all the doctor needed to say to me at that point was, you know, have you thought about finding a community group or a network of parents or whatever? I now volunteer and run the local Warwickshire group for adoptive parents, and that's invaluable. Like for our community, our group of parents, it's invaluable to just be a sounding board and to kind of share the frustrations. Or, you know, we've got a WhatsApp group, so there's daily conversations happening, and then we meet up on a monthly basis and things like that. It's just,
I think that's a tough one. Like you just said, the word man up and all those things that are thrown at you, you know, that's what was thrown at me for so long. And hearing those words could set someone back years, because it takes a lot of courage for you to phone up and be like, hey, I need help. So if you're getting that response, you know, it sets you back. And I think I want to bring up what you just said about the podcasts and people listening to it and people not being ready to speak. I think the people who sometimes need to hear this aren't listening to things like this. So like you said about the humanity, I think that's where, when we're out delivering things and talking on here, it's hoping that someone listens to this and then goes, right, I've identified these characteristics with someone, and then going to show the support. Because I think there's a lot of people who aren't listening to these resources or even thinking about mental health who need the support. So that's why spreading that awareness is even more important.
Just letting people know that those services are available, whether it's directly for them or whether they've got, you know, a child in a school, you know, they're a parent and they've got a child in a school, and, you know, they would just love to know that there was some kind of mentorship available or anything like that. Yeah, you're right.
And like, you know, what your example is a great one, because we look upon these things, or we hear them spoken about as weaknesses, but actually I think it's where we find some of the greatest strength is in these weak places. So you were in need of help,
Yeah.
and the outcome of that, from what you've just said, is that you've been active now in supporting others. And I think the lived experience, when people are able to come forward and share, most of the time, the human spirit's amazing, and in partnership and connection with others, you can really do a lot to help in situations. And that then is the power in that person to go on, pay it forward idea, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And I know a lot of the stuff around loneliness, and we find it with young people, is that there's not a one size fits all. It's all about co-design and working together. And so I think, if you are listening and you've been struggling with stuff, know that what you're going through can be used powerfully. When you find what works for you, I'm sure that will resonate with someone else, and it will help them.
And actually, peer-to-peer support is the strongest type of support, isn't it, in an environment where, and for organisations as well, that it's easier to switch on a peer-to-peer support network or group or whatever is it than have an indefinite tap of trained therapists and counsellors. Obviously, that's a really important part of it as well. But like you said, shared experiences and shared stories and being a shoulder to cry on for someone else. And you said yourself, like, what you're doing now is your own kind of therapy, because you're using your story and you're using your own experience, 100%. Isn't it? And
I think it's one of those, you look at mental resilience as a thing, and I was always told that being the strong man, being the person who didn't show emotion, was the sign of mental resilience, where realistically, if you can open up and talk, that's a massive sign of strength. And that's what I like to encourage in my thing. Showing emotion is a good thing. Showing emotion, even if it's like sadness, happiness, showing all emotion is a good thing. And you're only going to help yourself even more by realising that. And I think that's really important to say, because for so long that I didn't know that, because I wasn't told that. But showing emotion is not a sign of weakness. If anything, it is a sign of real strength and courage.
Absolutely. And I think too often, too many people try and hold it in and kind of, stiff upper lip. We're British, we don't need to talk about it, and kind of just keep going and keep going and keep going. And that's got to come out at some point somewhere, hasn't it? And it's only going to be worse the longer you keep that kind of bottled up. You're essentially kind of pickling your emotions, aren't you, inside? And then, we as parents as well, I think every parent has a duty to their kids to let them know that it's okay to feel rubbish sometimes, and it's okay to have an outburst of emotion, and actually what you should be doing is trying to unpick that with the child, not just saying, stop it, or there, don't worry, or whatever. It's actually like, well, what are you feeling sad about? What are you feeling anxious about? Let's try and understand that. Let's try and unpick it a little bit and kind of work that way. I don't know if that's the kind of advice that you would give as well in your experience.
And that's where connection, it's someone else stepping into your space. We talk a lot with other people that we train to do our work, the big difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy is seeking to understand from another's point of view. So what you're talking about is what we do. We hold out that invitation to young people, this space is for you. Use it how you want, and we offer them loads of craft and art materials, because you can't always find the words, but you might be able to find colours that really mean the power of that, what you're going through, and for all of us, I think if we feel accompanied in a difficult time, then we don't feel so alone, do we? And that's the first kind of building block to recognising we've got resources to walk through this, not floundering with no anchor. We call them anchors, you see. When you've anchored somewhere, then you can start to move forward, as opposed to feel like you're drifting back. And
I think as well, I just relate some of that back to in the working environment as well. So, for Mental Health Awareness Week, they're talking about how the working dynamic has changed and people are working remotely and hybrid and not having that regular contacts and all those kind of things. And as leaders and managers and, business owners and, just being a colleague, actually, there's a responsibility to have an eye out for other people. And I think, during Mental Health Awareness Week is really important. There's a big, generally there's a lot of talk nowadays about kind of mental health first aid at work and all those kind of practices. And a year ago, it's something I hadn't really ever heard of before. And it's so important. Like it's a really massive thing. And I've said before, but as an adoptive parent, we get trained in therapeutic parenting techniques and a thing called PACE, which is playful, accepting, curious, and empathetic. And it's a great way to parent, but also there's a massive crossover in being a pace manager or a pace leader in business as well, and actually being curious and empathetic with your teams and your staff and your colleagues and that kind of thing, isn't there? Because they might be having a really shit time. They might be struggling with something outside of work, and they don't want to bring it into the working environment, but actually by bottling it up, again, that's having a bigger impact on their delivery and their outputs. And if you notice that with a colleague, you should try and talk to them in a
100%. I think, like you said, I never would have thought that mental health first aid, you never heard that conversation, or you never heard it as a qualification. And I got asked the other week, if you were going for a job, what would you like to see them offer you? And every job you see, you've got to do your first aid. You got to do your first aid training. Yeah. So everyone knows that if I walked in here now and cut my head open, you'd be all over it, bandage everything.
I'd like to caveat, I haven't done my first aid certificate for a while, so it's been a few years. I know how to bandage your head. You'll be all right.
I don't feel safe now.
Somebody would jump in and rescue.
Someone.
Don't worry.
Every business has to have a nominated first aider at work, don't they? Yeah.
There we go. But you don't really hear that until recently, and I think every workplace should have it. The mental health first aider.
Absolutely.
100%. At least one person, and that. There's not always going to be someone who is comfortable with it, but if there is, I'd encourage them to get it. I've just got my level 2, and it was so, eye-opening. There was things I'd never even thought of, and it's just eye-opening to see what's going on. And then, talking of colleagues and peer-to-peer thing, sometimes all you need is are you okay? Do you want to go and have a coffee? Do you want to go and have a drink? Yeah, sometimes you don't need that, but just knowing someone is actually looking out for you, and knowing that, Andy looks a bit down today. Let's go for a coffee. Let's go and grab something to eat. Yeah. Sometimes that's what you need, and it gives you that boost. So I agree, if you are at work or school, wherever you are, just have that conversation with someone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I agree. And, it brings it back to all the things that Mental Health First Aid Awareness Week is talking about, isn't it? It's raising awareness, inviting conversation, asking other people to act, and volunteering to, stepping up to be that support that someone might need. So I think, we've come full circle, and it's been a really, decent conversation, find out more about Shine Youth and about Impactivity, talking about limits. And I'm kind of rounding it off because we've been talking for half an hour. The time's gone really quickly, and, it's a pretty good time to kind of conclude our discussion, I guess. Thank you very much for joining us. So I guess just to finish off, how can people get involved and help and support you as organisations? Where do they need to go if they want to find out more and that kind of thing? So just over to you, Andy, and then...
Yeah, of course. So the best way to find me is on social media. So Instagram, Facebook, just search for Impactivity, Talking Without Limits. It's the same on Spotify as well.
Cool. And we'll obviously share and tag you.
Yeah, of course. So all of my resources are on there. And then, if you are a school or anything like that, my email's also on the social media. So, you can feel free to email me if you need or want more information about what I do. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, same for us, basically. I mean, if you're going to tag us, then follow our socials, send us a DM, or you can email us on use the nice one, use hello. Hello at shineyouth.org.uk. And I think what we're really, really looking for at the moment, if there's anyone out there with these skills, we have developed a range of workbooks that we want to be able to publish so that all the schools that we work in, parents can get them for their young people if there's someone These workbooks will give a bit of education, some of the kind of encouraging things we've been talking about today, but they'll provide a space where young people can reflect for themselves and make sense of and find out what works for them. So if you're a graphic designer that might want to sort of help us just polishing those so they look amazing. Then send me an email, please.
Brilliant stuff. Well, I'm sure we can help find you someone. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much again, both, for joining us. It's been really good. It's lovely to hear about the work that you're doing and the impact that you're having, supporting young people and adults, and getting people to talk a little bit more, which is really important, especially this week during Mental Health Awareness Week. And that concludes our live. Thank you for listening. For more information about Make Good Grow or any of the good causes that we featured on the Behind the Cause podcast series, visit makegoodgrow.com/podcast.